Yeah, today is about what we kind of voted about in the group chat. So I put a poll out to get your feedback, and to be honest, like, it was pretty much even for every single choice. So I've had to kind of throw a little bit of everything in there. But the kind of main one that was sticking out was like motivation and goal setting. I think quite a few people looked into that, and then also around, you know, nutrition again and sleep as well. A lot of people seem to kind of vote into that. So I've kind of based it around motivation and trying to get the most out of our motivation and what we need to focus on. And then also using, you know, nutrition, sleep, and how that affects your motivation as well. So we'll kind of go into some principles around nutrition and sleep a little bit later on, and then just generally go into how to stay motivated. So I've called it Recharge and Rise. So motivation, nutrition, and recovery secrets for real results. So this is all about, you know, getting better results at the end of the day. So today is about building something that, you know, lasts. So it's easy to obviously have motivation for a short period, but can we stick at that for the rest of our lives for long periods? And not just a quick burst of motivation as well. So we want, you know, our motivation to be as stable as possible. You know, can we maintain what we're doing for a long time? And obviously we're going to have ups and downs with that as well. So I just want to kind of check in with you all. How motivated do you feel right now? So just be honest, it's not about judgment or awareness. So what I'll do is just bring up some scores, and then you can raise your hand where you feel motivated. So who feels at a kind of 1 to 3, so lowest motivation? Out of 10, yeah. Anybody? Good? 4, 5? Okay. 6, 7? Yeah. Okay. Anyone in the 8 to 10? Nice. That's what I like to see. So good. At least no one's in that really low bracket. So that's a good starting point. So some kind of motivation truths. So motivation isn't something that you wait for. Okay, it's something that you can build, and you can build motivation. And we can't rely on motivation all the time either. We've got to build some kind of resilience. Okay, so motivation is going to come and go. But if we can build resilience to, you know, turn up when we don't feel like it, then that's what really kind of makes a difference. Like I said, motivation is going to come and go, but we have systems to stay on track. So that's a really important part. If we can build systems in our lives that keep us accountable, that makes us doing, you know, our tasks like natural and automatic, then motivation, we don't need to kind of rely on it as much. So this is, you know, routines, habits, accountability. This all kind of unlocks when motivation drops. So when we are low, we have them routines, we have them habits that we've built up, and we have the accountability that keeps us going even though motivation might be a bit lower. And then when motivation is high, take advantage of it as well. So when we're in that kind of zone where we are super motivated, take advantage of it. Work really hard, do as much as you can in those periods. So the key to motivation is basically just having your why front of mind all the time. So you might have heard that before, but, you know, why are you doing this? Why did you start this process? It's so important, and what I'm going to do is show you through my why to give you an idea of why I've started, and then you can all kind of relate that to you know, why you really started this journey in the first place. Or, you know, this can go way back as well, like into your childhood almost. So if we have this why front of mind all the time, then it's going to make it a lot more tangible to stick to and, you know, work hard towards. Okay, so my why. So that was me when I was about 16, 17 there. So I've gone through obviously a big journey of, you know, training for a long time, working on myself, and, you know, when I was like that, I was, you know, a completely different person to what I am now. Was shy, nervous, didn't like going into crowded places or anything like that because I was, you know, super skinny. You know, I got bullied quite a lot as well. So when I was at school, really bad bullying when I was in school, and then I had bullies at home as well. So I had people on my street that was really bad. Some of them are in prison now, they were that bad. So I went through like quite a tough time at school, and it's because I was quite, you know, soft, quite weak. And I'm not saying that's like a bad trait to have, but, you know, people targeted me because of that, which is, sad that people do that, but it's because, I didn't, have any kind of like purpose or anything like that, I felt. So, when I was pretty much that age, I started getting into the gym, and I started getting into looking after myself. And, at that point I was just very, very self-conscious, very, very self-conscious. I had braces, I had really bad acne, I had asthma, so I had all these things like kind of holding me back. But, that was my reason why I wanted to start going to the gym and start looking after myself, because I wanted to, get in shape, I wanted to build my confidence, and I wanted to, just work on myself in a more positive way, and it's really worked on, building my confidence and having a better purpose in life, and it's led me into obviously this career, and it's kind of spiraled from there, obviously. So, me before, I was unconfident, shy, nervous, unsociable, scared of new environments, self-conscious. I had no purpose, and I was generally like unhappy because of all those things kind of holding me back a bit. And I'm not saying like your appearance is everything, like obviously it's down to who you are inside, that's the most important thing. But, working on ourselves and working on our appearance and, our strength and our fitness and, our kind of physical abilities can really help as well. So this is just my story, guys. Everyone's going to be a little bit different with this. So, now I am more confident, I'm more outgoing, I'm self-assured, I'm a leader, for my business and, my team. I've got higher self-esteem, I'm healthier, I have a bigger purpose in life, and, I'm generally happier. So that's the reason why I got in the gym, and that's the reason why I stay so consistent all the time, because I can remember my why from when I was younger, and it helps me just stay on track all the time. Like I never fall off now. And one of the main reasons I've managed to do that is because action creates the motivation, not the other way around. So just doing is the thing that helps motivation, and just doing things. So, with my journey, when I started, it wasn't perfect at all, but I was consistent all the way through. So when I first started training, my workouts were probably, rubbish compared to what they needed to be. It took me ages to make progress. I was probably that skinny for years and years, because I just was trying to do what I kind of knew. I wish back then I got a personal trainer myself to, learn a little bit quicker, but I kind of figured it out myself. So it took a little bit longer than what it could have been, but, that's what you do. So I also knew that if I didn't see progress, I never gave up as well. So I would always just stay consistent and keep working hard. Even when progress wasn't happening, I wouldn't give up. And now I've just learned how to, fall in love with looking after myself. So eating well, training, exercising, sleeping better, staying away from alcohol and, some of the negative things. Like I've learned to kind of fall in love with that, and it's easier for me. And I also kind of realised that the pain of feeling out of shape isn't worth the pain of getting in shape, if that makes sense. So that kind of pain of, being out of shape, and this can be anybody, if you're overweight or unfit or whatever it is, that kind of feeling of pain is a lot worse than actually just trying to get in shape and staying in shape as well, I think. And then over time, I've built the discipline, and I've just got more intuition of my body as well now. So as I've been doing it a long time, I kind of know what works for me in terms of eating, in terms of training, recovery, all that kind of stuff. So, depending what stage you are at on your journey as well, it can take a little bit of time to kind of, learn your own kind of intuition over your body. And that takes a bit of time sometimes. And I still enjoy myself, but I just have control. So I don't live a perfect life with food or, anything like that. I still enjoy myself. I still go out for meals, etc. But I've learned to have control, and I know my limits, and I know what works and what doesn't work. So that is my why, guys. So what I want you to kind of think about is, going back to that is, where were you before? Can you image, where you were before you started this process, or, even thinking, way back into your childhood or whatever it is. And then, what is your why now? So why are you doing this, and why are you starting? I just want you to kind of really get that into your head, because that's going to help with motivation a lot more. So I want you to look into your books, so if you just go to page 1. And I just want you to have a think about what you're struggling to stay consistent with at the moment. So you can circle any that apply and try to kind of narrow down the main things that you're struggling with consistency at the moment. And then as we kind of go through this workshop today as well, just try to keep in mind your why. So, think about that actively, think about why you started this journey, and then we're going to come to that a bit later on. So, why people lose motivation as well. So, we can sometimes rely on feelings, okay? A lot of people can have all or nothing mindset. We can have low energy and poor recovery, so motivation can drop because we're under recovered. And those things can, really make an impact on how you actually stay consistent over time. So if we are just relying on feelings all the time, that can affect our motivation. If we do have that all or nothing mindset, then obviously sometimes you're going to be motivated and doing the work. Sometimes you're not going to be motivated and not doing the work, and we don't want that to happen. And then, like I say, if we've got low energy, then we're going to be struggling with that motivation. So we're going to go through some kind of principles, okay? So like I said before, just doing action is really important. So actually just doing rather than thinking about it. So you don't need to kind of feel ready before starting a journey or starting a new thing in terms of your goals. You just need to get started. As soon as you get started, then the motivation keeps coming and keeps coming and keeps coming, and it builds. And then small actions build confidence as well. So if you think there's, like a really big challenge, if there's something that you're really struggling with, just small actions can just start to build that confidence a little bit. So if it is something that you're struggling with, getting in a good routine with or consistency, then just little small actions can get you started and get you going. And then confidence builds motivation as well. So once you start to build them small actions, that'll build a little bit of confidence, and then that'll build motivation on top of that as well. So number 2 is the kind of identity shift. So we've kind of covered this quite a lot over different workshops, but who you are is kind of what you do, okay? So habits reflect your identity, and identity drives your behavior, yeah? So if you see yourself as an inconsistent person, your actions are going to match that as well. So if you constantly tell yourself, I'm inconsistent, I can't do this, I can't do that, then your actions are going to follow that. So you have to speak a little bit more positively about yourself. So for example, I'm trying to be healthy. You're not trying to be healthy. You are someone who looks after your body, and you are someone who is healthy. That language just helps to kind of, change the way you act around the whole thing. And then, standards obviously change the behaviour. So the higher standards you have changes your behaviour. Then principle 3 is consistency. So obviously consistency, we all know about it. But I would rather have you, 80% of effort consistently rather than 100% occasionally, yeah? I'd rather that than, trying to be perfect and then falling off. We'd rather have that kind of 80% of consistent work all the way through, and it's going to get you there in the end. So we need to kind of remove the extremes, banish the kind of all or nothing mindset if we've got that, and then just do the basics well over a long time. I know it sounds boring, but it works, and that's the whole point around this. And if you are getting them basics right and you are building the habits, then you're on the right track and it's going to happen. So if you go to page 2, I want you to just have a real think about these questions. So spend quite a few minutes doing this. So who do I want to become? What habits match that identity? And what needs to change? So don't overthink this or anything, just literally be honest and, write what comes to mind. Cool, okay. So yeah, at least you've got a really good idea on, what you need to work on and the things that are kind of holding you back. So the switch. Motivation is obviously mental, it's a mental thing, but it is also physical as well. So when we're thinking about energy, this is all to do with our motivation as well, okay? So if we're physically low on energy, then we've got a mental low drive as well. So sleep impacts that, it impacts our mood, and recovery impacts our discipline as well. So if we are sleep deprived, if we're low on energy, if we're not recovering well, then our motivation is going to drop because of that, and that means our discipline can drop as well. So this is why sleep and recovery and looking after ourselves on that side of things is just as important as the training side of things as well. So you can't expect high motivation with low energy. It's a simple thing. If we're low on energy, then we're going to struggle being motivated. So this leads us into sleep and recovery and how we can optimize our sleep. Sleep is so important, and it can be so undervalued from a lot of people, including myself in the past. You just don't really understand how much of an impact it has on so many things. Okay, so sleep fundamentals. To optimize sleep, you need to start 6 to 8 hours before your sleep time. Okay, so if you're going to bed at 10, that needs to be 6 to 8 hours before you're thinking about that. So I'll explain why. So caffeine stays in the bloodstream around 6 hours, okay? So that's just its half-life as well. So you need to be cutting out any caffeine 6 hours before you go into bed, going to sleep. We also need to minimize food, alcohol, and exercise 3 hours before bed. Now, in an ideal world, that's okay. It's not always going to be an ideal world. Some of us need to eat later on. Some of us need to train later on. That's just how it is. We've got to do that. But ideally, if we can cut all that out before 3 hours before our bedtime, then it's going to give us much better rest. So if we're eating, then our digestive system is obviously working. All the blood's going into our digestive system. It's not able to go to our brain as efficiently, and we're not going to sleep as better because of that. Alcohol obviously is going to be a sleep disruption, so we want to be cutting that out before bed as best we can. Something like half a glass of wine or something like that would be all right. It wouldn't really kind of mess with it, but anywhere from like a glass of wine or a pint of beer, it's going to affect your sleep. And then exercise is a stimulant as well, so it's going to raise obviously cortisol, so you're going to be wide awake. So we want to try and minimize that as best we can, but also if you have to train at night, that's just how it is. And then we also want to kind of minimize hydration an hour before bed as well. Obviously we want to get our water in, stay hydrated through the day, try and get that in earlier on, but around an hour before bed we want to try and minimize that. And then obviously, a big one is tech, so minimizing, blue light, emails, going on phones, social media, TV, whatever it is, at least 30 minutes before bed as well, okay? So again, stimulants in your brain. If you're watching things, consuming things, all those things are going on in the back of your head and you're going to sleep and it's still going on without you kind of realizing it. And then your sleep environment as well. So this goes down to bedding, temperature, light. These can all affect how you sleep and how deep you sleep. So temperature, it needs to be cool. So a nice cool room if it is obviously going into warmer weather. Bedding, again, dependent on each person, but again, kind of light bedding when it gets a bit warmer helps. And then we want it to be as dark as possible as well. So getting a room completely dark, no little lights or anything on as well. To help us sleep in the best way. And then we also want a bit of a wind down routine, so baths, journaling, books, walking, this can all just help us lower our state, get nice and calm before we go to bed, get everything out of our minds that's going on and buzzing around that can keep people up at night. And these kind of things can obviously help us kind of just de-wind a little bit.
Tom, sorry.
Yeah?
Would you count walking as exercise? Says minimise exercise.
Not with walking, yeah.
Not that you mean.
Yeah, I'm talking something getting heart rate up at a higher level. So yeah, like a gentle walk or something like that would be quite good. Because at the end of the day, that's just helping you relax. It's nothing that's getting your heart rate up too much. Yeah. But we just want to create a bit of a system around this, guys, and really kind of think about what we need to focus on. So in a minute, we'll write down what everybody needs to kind of focus on. In particular, but in general we want to create this routine. So we want to be going to sleep at the same time, we want to be waking up at the same time. Obviously our body is like a clock, so we want to get into that routine and that cycle and then we want to try and get a bit of a consistent wind down routine to lead up into that, and then following all these kind of markers as well, so caffeine, alcohol, especially hydration, and then definitely tech and all that kind of stuff as well. So obviously the impact of poor sleep, it can increase your hunger, so sleep deprivation affects your hormones, so your hunger hormones, and that can start to spike cravings. Reduce willpower as well, so if we are lower on energy, then our willpower can suffer. So this all relates to how you think about food and go through your day, and then you're going to be in a worse mood as well. So ideally we all want to be in a good mood all the time, but this is something that affects it. And this is why people overeat and can skip sessions as well. So if we're tired, if we're underslept, sleep deprivation is in our routines on a frequent basis, then this is going to happen more consistently. Obviously we're never going to be perfect. There's going to be times where we're not going to sleep perfectly. That's just how it is. But if we can get more consistent with good sleep, then it's going to make a big impact over the course of the year. So page 3, sleep action step. So what can you improve tonight? When you go home tonight, what can you do to improve your sleep time? Can it be an earlier bedtime, less caffeine, better routine to wind down into? Cool, so we really want to act on this, guys, because I know it can be easy to get back into normal routine and go home and kind of forget about it and not really act on it, but sleep is super, super important. So if we can optimize this, it'll make a big difference to anything else that you're struggling with in terms of motivation, eating habits, energy in your training sessions, all this kind of stuff. It can really impact everything. So we're going to slide into nutrition now and just go into some nutritional values. So, nutrition mindset. Generally, most people don't need more information. We just need better execution with our nutrition in general, okay? So most people know what's healthy, we just kind of struggle to stay consistent with it on a whole. So this isn't about, giving you a perfect diet, it's just about helping you follow through with it, okay? So obviously we can give more advice around what types of foods to eat and the right type of nutrition to kind of follow, but it's just following through more often than not, okay? And the real kind of goal of nutrition is to do all these things. So we want to control hunger, we want to support our energy, stay consistent. We're not looking for perfection, we're not looking for restriction or any extremes, we're just looking for some consistent work to stay on top of our nutrition longer term. And if your nutrition doesn't help you stay consistent, it's not working as well. So if you're following some kind of protocol that is kind of stopping you staying consistent overall, it's just not the right type of plan to follow. So we want to create something that's going to work so you can stay consistent, so you can stick at it long term. And these are our kind of priorities for nutrition, guys. So, I've gone over this in other workshops as well, but it's important to kind of revisit it. Protein, super important. The structure of how we set up our meals, this goes back to meal planning and preparation. And then the environment as well. So thinking about our home environment, how is that looking around? What foods do we keep in at home? Do we keep, snacks readily available and temptations coming into the whole thing? So we want to kind of just forget complicated plans. If you get these things right, everything starts to improve. So if we focus our meals high on protein, if we get the structure right around the whole week, and if we can create a better environment at home, then it's all going to start to work a lot better. So obviously protein helps with fullness, so that's why we want to include it in our diet. This fullness also improves recovery, and it improves control as well, so control over your diet. So obviously protein keeps you satisfied for longer, it reduces cravings, and it supports muscle and metabolism. That's why it's so important, and that's why we focus on it. So aim for around 20 to 40 grams per meal. Things like chicken, eggs, Greek yogurt, fish, lean beef, protein shakes are all really good ways to increase your protein in your diet, okay? And if there's one habit to build, it's this to start off with. So if we're getting protein into our meals, that is the focus. That's the number one thing I have with any meal that I include in my diet is getting a good source of protein in there first and foremost. So every meal should kind of include around this basis. So I don't want to just give you, the meals to choose. I want you to kind of have a bit of intuition on how to create meals and, base it off this. So protein around 1/4 of a plate. Fibre, so, your veg and your fruit around 1/2 a plate. And then you can have carbs for energy, so grains, etc., whole grains, 1/4 of a plate. And then we've got a small amount of healthy fats for, a bit of satisfaction, blood glucose control, but this needs to be, a small amount so we're not overdoing it on higher calories, okay? So this all prevents, overeating later. So if we're having balanced meals throughout the day, this is going to avoid us overeating later on in the day. And it's also going to help keep energy stable, okay? So our blood glucose levels, it's going to help that stay stable throughout the day. So no sugar crashes or anything like that. So when meals are balanced, everything just becomes easier. It's a lot easier to create a meal, it's a lot easier to stick to it. Balance is just the most simplest way to go forward. So hunger versus cravings. Hunger is, a physical thing. Cravings is more of an emotional habit type of thing. So we have gone into this a lot deeper on one of the other workshops, but it's important to kind of recognise that difference. And again, going back to poor sleep, that's going to increase cravings, so that's why the sleep isn't so important. And then skipping meals can also increase overeating as well with some people, okay? So if we are skipping meals and we're missing, frequent eating times throughout the day, then, we're going to feel a bit hungry later on, and then we can often overeat because of that. So if you're constantly, just snacking, it's usually because your structure isn't right. It's not a willpower thing, it's just that the structure's not right and you're not feeding yourself and nourishing yourself with the right types of foods to start with. So this is why structure is so important, and that's why it beats willpower. Planned eating over reactive eating, yeah. So regular meals reduce, poor decisions. Less thinking means better consistency. We want around, 3 meals, 1 to 2 snacks a day for most people, okay? And yeah, most bad choices happen when you're unprepared, obviously, okay? So if we're prepared, then bad choices don't come in. And then we've got this kind of all or nothing trap. So if we're just all in, we can sometimes then burn out, and then we can go off track. So this is why that kind of 80% consistent rather than 100% occasionally thing works. So one meal doesn't ruin your progress. So that's one thing you've got to really understand. So a lot of people can, have a bad meal and then it's, throw everything out the window and, we kind of have a bit of a meltdown, but it doesn't need to be like that. One bad day doesn't matter either. We want to just minimize that as much as we can. And then if something like that does happen, it's okay. We just get back on track and carry on the way we were. So this mindset is usually what keeps a lot of people stuck for many, many years. And this is why people can go round and round this cycle of, yo-yo dieting and eating well one week and then eating poorly the next. So that's what we want to avoid. And like I said before, environment is really important as well. So environment just shapes your choices. So where you eat, what you have at home, who you socialise with as well sometimes. We want to keep high protein foods available all the time and reduce easy access ultra processed snacks. So if our fridge and cupboards are filled with that kind of stuff, then it's so much easier to go to that kind of stuff. So we want to try and make our environment as good as possible. And then prepping is just so important. So prepping simple meals, keeping them in your fridge, keeping them at home, that's going to make it a lot more easier to go to them when time is short or whatever it is. So we just want to make good choices a lot easier rather than harder. So that's the thing. We want to just make our nutrition an easy choice. That's the way to do it. And that might look differently to every single person, but we've got to find, something easy that's going to work for us, okay? And decision fatigue can be a huge thing as well. So more decisions equals worse decisions. So sometimes, and this can be different for everybody, but if we're just, repeating meals, repeating and repeating, then that keeps us staying consistent all the time, okay? And then the routine kind of reduces the stress as well. So if we've just got loads of decisions to make and loads of options, then sometimes we're kind of like, all right, well, what am I going to do today? And then we get all muddled up. Whereas, for me, for example, I'm quite just regimented. I'm a bit boring. Like, I'll just eat similar things all the time. But that's what works for me. And everyone's a bit different. If it doesn't work for you, then you've got to find a system that does. So that could be, repeating a meal for 3 days, repeating a different meal for 3 days, or if you stick to one thing for 1 week and then another thing for another week, you've got to kind of find what works for you, but you've got to find something that is going to stick. So you don't need, variety all the time. You just need to have a bit of reliability with it, basically. So flexible, not perfect. So like I said before, 80% consistent, not 100% perfect. Include foods you enjoy as well. So you can include things like that, just in moderation, obviously. And then just avoid the kind of restriction mindset as well. So avoid just restricting ourselves completely. And the best plan is the one you're going to stick to long term. So if that plan means that you've got some foods that you enjoy in there a little bit, and that might not be perfect, but it helps you stay consistent longer term, then that's a plan that works for you, and that's a plan that's going to work. Whereas if we've got this ultra restricted diet and it's not going to work long term, then what's the point? Because we're not going to stick to it. And then just touching on kind of eating out as well, social life, we want to stay in control without missing out as well. We've all got lives, we've all got to enjoy ourselves, but there's things that we can do. So prioritizing protein, don't over restrict before or after too much, and just make better, not perfect choices, yeah? So just little improvements all the way through. You don't need to avoid life to get results. You can still enjoy yourself. I still enjoy myself, but we've just got to build a system that's going to work overall. So, daily focus. To win every single day, we want to hit our protein, eat structured meals, stay consistent. Stack enough good days and results are going to take care of themselves, yeah? So if we get in more good days and bad days, then it's going to improve. Simple done consistently beats perfect done occasionally. So I've touched on that quite a few times. Most people just go wrong by overcomplicating something that should be pretty simple, and that's where a lot of people can stay stuck with this. And you've all got into a good routine already, and you're already down the line of your journey. But a lot of people can be overcomplicating the whole situation. Social media doesn't help with that sometimes with all the misinformation out there. So keeping things simple is an easy way to go. So what I want you to do now, guys, is go to page 4, and I just want you to build your 3 go-to meals, okay? So for breakfast, lunch and evening, if you can just think of 3 meals that are your go-to meals that you can prepare pretty easily, you can stick to it. And these are going to be the fundamental meals of your diet that will help you stay consistent and not fail. And there's a few kind of examples there. Cool, guys. So I want to kind of go back into the kind of goal setting a bit now. We've kind of touched on sleep, recovery and nutrition. Obviously those areas are super, super important. But I'm just going to go through some kind of motivational things. If anyone is low on motivation, or if you're kind of struggling a little bit, just think about these things and think about what I'm going to say. So sometimes you are a lot closer than you think. Like if you are quite kind of low on motivation, you could be a lot closer than you potentially think, because not because everything is perfect, but just because you're here, you're trying and you're willing to improve. Like you've taken this first step to start this journey. However long you've been here, you have taken that step. So take that as motivation and build on it. You don't need to like a big complete overhaul or anything like that. If you're really struggling, you just you don't need to be extreme, like I've said before. You just need to keep showing up on the days you feel good, and especially on those days that you don't as well. So just keep showing up and build motivation from that, because every small effort that you do kind of make is building something bigger in the long run. So them little small steps is going to keep building and building. And you know, this is where things can change as well. So, you know, going into all this information today, take what you've learned and put it into practice. You know, not tomorrow, not next week, literally today. So start to think about what you're going to change and start to put it into action. Because, you know, we don't need more motivation. We just need to start doing the things and start doing the things that we need to do. So take what you've learned, you know, apply one thing and just build it from there. Don't feel overwhelmed, just build on the things and build. Because the people, you know, who do get results, they're not always the most motivated, that's the thing. They're the ones that just refuse to stop. So like I was at the start, you know, even though I wasn't getting everything right, I never stopped. I just kept doing, and I was consistent with everything. And just start to see yourself differently as well. You know, if you do struggle with kind of like the mentality side of things, you know, you're not someone who struggles, you know. You are someone who is improving, someone who is building, someone's that is following through on what they say they're going to do. Because every time you choose to, you know, show up, no matter how small it feels, you're becoming that person and you're becoming a better person to build on. And that's how, you know, the real change really happens. And just remember, you know, you don't need to be perfect. It's just about consistency. This is what we're after. You don't need to feel ready. You just need to kind of start, no matter what that is. If that's, you know, taking care of your lunches, Gordon, you've just got to start. That's the thing. Don't need to be perfect. You don't need to change everything as well. You just, you know, don't give up. And at the end of the day, guys, you know, you've already taken the hardest step by, you know, starting this process, by showing up, deciding you want more for yourself as well. A lot of people don't even get to this position or even step through the door at the beginning. So remember that you've taken that step, and that's the biggest one. So be proud of the fact, you know, you've taken that first step and you're working on yourself. Now it's about backing it up with action and following through with it. So stay consistent, keep it simple, and just trust the process as well. If you trust the process, then results will come. Because if you do that, results aren't a question of, you know, if, it's just a matter of when it's going to happen, okay? And the amount of effort that you put in, the amount of steps you take, that's going to determine the speed at which that is. So, a 6-week goal, guys. I want you to write down one thing you want to achieve in 6 weeks' time, okay? And then think about the top 3 action steps that you need to take to get there. That's the most important thing. There's no point writing down a 6-week goal and not figuring out how to actually get there. So I want you to try and make this goal, you know, specific to something. Make sure that you can, you know, achieve it. But make sure it's not too easy that it, you know, needs a bit of action and it needs a bit of hard work as well. So who's got some good goals for me? Gareth, you want to give me yours?
So I would say in the next 6 weeks I want to improve my sleep pattern or routine to become more energetic and remotivated.
Nice.
I think where I've kind of slipped off is since last July I've had my focus on my skiing since last July, and now the ski season's over. Yeah. So it's like, right, where am I going next? And kind of since I came back end of the first week of April, I've kind of just allowed myself to let a few habits that creep in, which is stop my sleep. But actually listening to you today, the sleep will be some of the habits that have crept in, i.e. snacking, eating later, things like that. So if I can work that out, then hopefully those other things will stop as well, so back into the routine. So I've always got that good reset in the morning, go back to the same breakfast every morning. I've had that for like probably 10 months now. Yeah. Lunch is good. It's just the evening routine. It's
cool. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because you can see how it all kind of, you know, makes a difference. Like if your sleep falls off, then them habits can fall in, and then motivation. You know, your motivation was a bit lower, wasn't it? So
that's it. But you just feel knackered, so you think, well, I just need something else to eat that's going to give me energy to keep me going. And actually, probably don't. It's easy to grab those things, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
So that's my goal.
Nice one. So even identifying that if we get our sleep better, then that improves the eating habits. Yeah, so that's good. Nice one. Anybody else?
I'd like to drop £5.
Nice. Yeah.
It's got a lot of, well, yeah, New Zealand and
Big holiday.
yeah. So that would be, that'd be a good goal. I think it's achievable in my time. So I could do my 2 classes, non-negotiable, do 1 to 2 runs, and a yoga session a week, and just keep on it and get a calorie deficit.
Sweet, nice one. Yeah, make it nice and clear and stick to it. Good, like that. Anyone else want to share? Okay.
Okay, I just put, I want to have a daily, weekly nutrition routine I can stick to consistently. So I've put a thing about planning, in terms of batch cooking, shopping, just really thinking it through. And then I've put, I was struck by something you said about like rethinking my daily structure to make the meals more important. So rather than this is my day, where do I fit the 3 meals in? More like, okay, they're important. Can I structure, to what extent I can do that, can I structure my day around that?
Yeah.
So that the meals, they're non-negotiable, as you were saying.
Yeah.
So that they have to happen by then ideally, and it is an ideal because it won't be every single time, like trying to get my evening meal by 6 p.m. or something,
Yeah, that's it. Yeah,
things like that.
Set a time limit to it,
So it's, just trying to make structure around meals, not the other way around. And obviously that's not always going to be possible.
So if you can do that more often than not.
More often than not, yeah. And I do, because I'm freelance, I can maybe play a bit with that.
Yeah, that's it, and just making it priority, more of a priority. Yeah. Cool. Okay.
Yeah, so mine is like, I have belly fat, so reduce some belly fat. So since I started, I did reduce some fat, but still I have that cortisol weight, so I need to reduce that in 6 weeks. So the top 3 action for me is obviously the workout, and the top priority is like the sleep, because that's something I'm struggling still. And then I do have a balanced diet though, but sometimes I do crave for sugar a lot, and once in a while I do have a lot of oil with friends, so just reduce that a lot.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah, and if you improve your sleep as well, that's going to reduce them sugar cravings as well. So again, that's a bit of a link there. So cool, nice. Stick to that then. Anyone else? All good. So yeah, guys, this 6-week goal is important. So don't just write it down. I always say this, but don't chuck it in your cupboard. Keep that out in front of you, so you're going to stick to it. Speak to the team and everything each week as well to keep you on track. When we set these goals, follow through with it. So yeah, nice work today, guys. Hopefully that's kind of increased a bit of motivation for some people that needed it, or keep pushing on with the motivation for those of you that were up there. The next one's the last Tuesday in May, so I'll put another poll out again to see what kind of topics we want to cover, and just kind of make it as useful as possible. So if you've got any ideas as well, anything else that you want covering that you're kind of unsure of, just let me know, drop me a message or whatever, and then we can get it in there. So cheers, guys. All right.